And Afghanistan now seems poised on the brink of a complete Taliban takeover. Let's take a look at the top developments on the ground at this hour. First, with Afghanistan's second and third largest cities having fallen into Taliban hands, Kabul has effectively become the besieged last stand for the government forces, who have offered little or no resistance elsewhere. Heavy fighting is being reported from Maidan Sheher, just adjacent to Kabul, leaving the United States and other countries scrambling to airlift their nationals out of Kabul ahead of a feared all-out assault. India, Germany, Qatar, Turkey and several other nations have reaffirmed that they will not recognize any government in Afghanistan that has been imposed through the use of military force. Many countries are scrambling to evacuate their workers and citizens amidst a rapid Taliban advance. US Embassy, staff have been ordered to begin shredding and burning sensitive materials as the first of US troops arrived in Afghanistan to help diplomatic staff leave. The UN chief says that the situation is spinning out of control with devastating consequences for civilians, and the Taliban advance has come even as US and other foreign troops are withdrawing after 20 years of military operations, and the fighting has raised fears that gains made in human rights, gains made since the militants were ousted from power in 2001, could be swiftly reversed. Well, joining us now for a live report, live from Afghanistan, from Kabul, is the war correspondent Ayesha Tanzeem. She's also the VOA Voice of America Bureau Chief for Afghanistan and Pakistan. Ayesha, thank you so much for your time. First and foremost, President Ghani spent the evening in consultations. He said in his speech today, without giving many specifics, what can you tell us about the outcome of these talks right now?
Well, nobody's officially said anything. All the meetings were off the record, behind closed doors, whatever you want to call them. There were a lot of speculation and rumors going around that President Ghani was going to resign in return for a Taliban ceasefire. He did not resign, but he also said that consultations were ongoing. So there is still speculation going on around Kabul that some of these meetings are designing a policy forward, which could include a mechanism for an interim government, which could include a mechanism for President Ghani stepping down. Nobody is saying that that's the final decision yet, but that is one element on the table, because right now the Afghan government has limited options. It can make a stand against the Taliban. Kabul still has, from my sources, even Western sources say Kabul has strong defense mechanisms. So they hope that the fight for Kabul will be harder than the fight for other cities, but Taliban have proven everybody wrong. Nobody thought that they would be at the gates of Kabul literally within 8 days of starting their assaults on provincial capitals.
What is the situation in Kabul where you are right now? You know, night is setting. I think you're an hour or so behind us. Reports of Afghans from all over the country over the past week we had seen were flooding to Kabul, expecting it to be the last bastion standing. Yet at the same time, we're reporting that the Taliban is upon Kabul. What are the scenes one sees in Kabul right now?
Well, the scene one sees, and I was out and about today. There are two kinds of things. One, there are very poor people who are saying they have nowhere to go, and whether Taliban come or someone else comes, they'll go about their daily lives, they'll do their daily wages and earn their living. They're just hoping that there's no bloodshed, that if Taliban come, they come as part of a political deal, so at least there's no mayhem and there's no fighting. Then there's the other part of Kabul, which is people who are slightly educated, and there are a lot of them, younger people. Most of Afghanistan is now young after 40 years of war. A lot of people are 40 years or younger. They are really worried about the gains they've made in the last 20 years. I was talking to one young man today who said that he has a master's degree and he doesn't see a future for himself in Afghanistan anymore under the current circumstances. He said, if I could leave, I would leave today. The problem is, everybody, so for example, fares out of Afghanistan through the roof. One-way fares out of Afghanistan are 4 times the price that they used to be under normal circumstances. There are no visas to be had. Every country that was issuing visas to Afghans is overwhelmed, and some of them have stopped processing visas. The passport office, overwhelmed. A lot of Afghans who never had passports, everybody's applying for a passport. So what you see is everybody trying to leave, often having little options. We also hear reports from IOM and other international organizations of Afghans trying to travel illegally. VOA reported on some who ended up in Turkey, but because they were illegal, they could do nothing, get no facilities, and were literally collecting garbage. So there seems to be no good way out for people who want to leave Afghanistan under the current circumstances, and those who are staying behind are not sure about the future. They don't know whether it's going to be a civil war, whether Taliban are going to attack, whether they're just going to surround and strangle the city, because in a city this large with millions of people, food and water and other supplies have to come through the road. So if the Taliban are controlling the roads, they can lay siege to the city. So a lot of uncertainty.
A nightmarish situation, really, while the whole world watches, the international community sits and watches all of this emanating out of Afghanistan. Lastly, Ayesha, if I can just ask you, what does this mean? What are the fears, the thoughts on the ground when it comes to the gains made in terms of human rights, women's rights? You know, are we expecting a rollback of that, all the gains made over the last 20 years?
Yes, everybody's expecting a rollback. To what degree, nobody knows. So today there was news from Herat that women who were trying to go to universities, were sent back. Women who worked in offices and were going to offices were sent back. Taliban, on the other hand, have promised that they would allow women to go to school and go to work. They only require that women wear a hijab or an abaya and cover their hair. The point is, to what degree would Taliban separate women from men? To what degree would they require them to cover themselves up? How much? Nobody really knows. We have seen different scenarios in different provinces under Taliban. As Human Rights Watch reported, in some areas under Taliban, women, young girls were not allowed to go to school after primary school. In other parts of Afghanistan, they were. So right now, the scenario is that it's different in different parts and depends on the local military commanders. If the Taliban, and again, it's a big if the Taliban take over Kabul, either through a political deal or through a military takeover, assumption is that they will try to make a uniform policy for the country. Whether that uniform policy is applied uniformly across the country, or whether, and to what degrees rights are rolled back, we don't know. But we already know that in media houses in areas under Taliban control, they've stopped playing music. In a lot of them, they're only playing religious chants. So yes, nobody's expecting Afghanistan to stay as is. The rights and gains that people have enjoyed in the last 20 years will definitely be rolled back. It's just no way of knowing how much.
Ayesha, thank you so much. Ayesha Tanzeem, for your live reports. Take care and stay safe.